Adrenaline, the fire I breathe is where I live. Incredible, an animal, one life to live. I never give up, I never give in. Some people wanna turn and run, but the strong rise under the gun. Top to the top, ain't never gonna stop. To the top, ain't never gonna stop. Never gonna keep me down. Still the one that's standing now. Yesterday is calling me, go down in history. Every day I fight to be legendary.
Darth Vader, the Joker, Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, the Alien from Aliens, the Watcher from Predator, the Terminator from Terminator, Robert Patrick from T2. What do all these characters have in common? They're all villains. But not only that, they're for many people the most iconic part of their respective movies. Darth Vader is considered possibly the most iconic character in Star Wars history. The Joker was the highlight of both Batman '89 and The Dark Knight. Michael Myers is obviously the poster child for the Halloween franchise, Jason Voorhees for Friday the 13th, Freddy Krueger for Nightmare on Elm Street, the Alien for Alien, the Watcher for Predator, and the Terminators for the Terminator franchise. All of these characters are extremely popular. You see them in Halloween costumes, cosplays, posters, paintings, artworks of the movies. Every time there's something related to their franchises, they're always involved. Which does lead to a question I think we need to ask. Why do we love villains so much? It seems that our society loves to hate antagonists, whether it's because we love to hate them or hate to love them. We just love watching them on screen, and we always love salivating at the thought of them coming on. Every time there's a new Star Wars movie, there's always a salivating thought. Even if you know it's probably not going to happen, there's always that thought of, will Vader come on screen? And when he does, how cool is it going to be to see his presence, hear his breathing, and James Earl Jones' deep voice? A lot of the old Disney films are iconic for their villains. Maleficent, Sleeping Beauty, Scar from Lion King, Ursula from The Little Mermaid, the Evil Queen from Snow White. So many of these old villains we love and remember as some of the greatest antagonists in film history. In fact, some of the best films in history are known to have amazing antagonists. But wait a second, why do we love them? Why do we revere them so much? Why do we praise them as characters that we all love? Because by design, villains are not meant to be liked. They're meant to be hated. Villains are meant to be jeered. They're what's supposed to stand in the way of our protagonist or our hero. So I thought it was time to look at what makes us fall in love with our antagonists. Whether it's because we love to jeer them, love to cheer them on, just love watching them on screen, whatever it may be, what makes us love watching a villain on screen? To really look at this, I decided to break down the 3 types of villains that we see in movies. Now, I know there are lots of different types of villains, and some have been done different ways, but I decided to look at the 3 main type villains. The first villain is pure evil. No humanity, no sympathy, nothing that makes them good or humane at all, just pure evil. A lot of the old Disney villains fall under this category, along with slashers like Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, the Alien, Freddy Krueger, Leatherface. Some of the most famous and iconic Halloween monsters and villains fall under this category. There's really no sympathy to them, they just basically are pure evil. So what makes us love these villains so much? Well, because if our hero is so good, naturally whatever makes the obstacle so evil, we want our hero to overcome it. And that probably leads into the first factor that makes us love villains so much, the thrill of the chase. We just love sometimes watching a thrilling adventure, and sometimes nothing makes an adventure more thrilling than a good antagonist. When a villain is just pure evil and they do nothing but try to take down our hero, and they cause nothing but destruction and wanton mayhem everywhere they go, naturally, if the hero is likable, we want them to overcome these obstacles and make their way toward the end of the story. That's what makes an adventure so thrilling. A lot of the old Disney films did use this to maximum potential. A lot of the old Disney films did have okay protagonists, but they weren't the best written in film history, but that they compensated that with having such dark and evil, over-the-top villains, and naturally, because the evil was so frightening and scary, we wanted the heroes to overcome it. And that's something that honestly is good for any adventure story. Whether it be an action film or a horror film, we just kind of want to see good, innocent people make it out alive. Slasher films use that to maximum potential. Halloween, Friday the 13th, kind of, if you really look at the teens in the later films, and especially Nightmare on Elm Street, focus on innocent people who really, while they aren't exactly saints, have done nothing to warrant dark punishment or vile murder. So when these vile murders are being done to people, like say Laurie Strode, we want to see them get out of it because, hey, they don't deserve it, why should they suffer from it? Alien kinda used this in the first film, where you have a crew of engineers that are just kinda doing their job and they stumble across a horrible threat that's unbeatable. So, of course, you want these people to avoid it because you realize they're just doing their job. They didn't try to start a war between themselves and this species, whatever it is. Aliens kinda capitalized on that, except in that movie the humans actually fight back. Horror films can still use this today, the idea that the evil is just so frightening that you want your protagonist, even if they're not the most identifiable character, you want them to get out of it. So that's the first villain and the first factor that makes us love them, just the thrill of the adventure. And that's what movies are for, just the thrill of the adventure. The second type of hero that we can fall into is just the awesome villains. The villains we just love watching, whether because they look cool, do cool things, or both. We just love watching them on screen. And that kinda does tie into the first factor, just the thrill of the adventure. If the hero is really cool and fun and really cool to watch, naturally it's just as awesome when someone as their opposite, who probably matches them or is even better than them, comes along. A lot of the Batman villains can sometimes fit into this category. Batman is supposed to be the idea of human physical and mental perfection, the world's greatest detective and trained by some of the most elite fighting ninjas in the world. So when we see these villains that can either match him physically, mentally, or both, it makes us love the thrills and chases that Batman goes through all the more. Villains like the Penguin, Riddler, Deathstroke, and of course, the Joker. What makes the Joker such a great antagonist is that he's Batman in every way except physically. But he's also Batman's complete opposite. Batman, dark, brooding, doesn't show much emotion, whereas the Joker is more bright, colorful, and wants to get nothing but emotion. These two make great foils, and it's a reason that why I get so many people say that the Joker's just been overused and overdone. But since he's such a popular character, and since he's Batman's complete opposite, and the rivalry is so much fun to watch, I can't really blame people for just wanting to write Batman stories with the Joker as the main villain over and over again. The animated series took this to its full potential. Having the Joker come up with these big elaborate schemes that all make some kind of a joke, just so he can get on Batman's nerves and try to kill him. It fits the rivalry perfectly. The Terminator films can fit into this as well. Sarah Connor, especially in T2, becomes sort of her own level of awesome, able to wield shotguns, machine guns, and able to take down Terminators by herself. So when we see Robert Patrick as this indestructible, seemingly impossible machine to kill, and we see Arnold, who is sort of like that in the first film, it becomes even cooler when we see these two Terminators throw down. One's the protagonist, one's the antagonist. They're not incredibly deep characters, but they're just so cool and fun to watch that when they fight, you are invested all the way through. You could argue the first Predator film also did this. Yeah, Dutch and his team of soldiers aren't exactly deep characters, but what are they the example of? They're awesome characters. They're big, they're ripped, they're beefy, they have awesome machine guns, they say cool one-liners, and they can take down hundreds of people by themselves. So when a mysterious creature comes along that can fight pretty much better than they can, hunts better than they can, has better equipment than they do, when they go toe-to-toe with this creature, it's kind of just fun to see who's going to win. And it makes it even more suspenseful when the creature just takes them apart one by one. So that way when Dutch goes up against the Predator, it makes the fight so much more intense. Because you can tell these are two pretty equal opponents, and it's pretty much just whose wit and will is going to win out. Another thing about cool villains is, let's just be honest, it's fun for more merchandise. If you go to the Disney parks and you see Galaxy's Edge, what do they have march in? Not rebel soldiers, not Jedi Masters, stormtroopers. Why? Because look at the armor, look at the designs, they're freaking awesome. Everyone, when it comes to Halloween costumes, they either want to dress up as Darth Vader, Kylo Ren, or one of the stormtroopers. Because look at the designs that they put into the armor, and the clone troopers as well. Yeah, even the prequels did put in some thought into the design of the clone armors, giving them each their own unique color and design patterns. So, yeah, being a villain just means you look cooler. I mean, look at Deathstroke, one of my favorite villains from DC. He looks amazing. How could you not want a costume of that kind of style? So that's one part about liking a cool villain. They just sell more merchandise. That's one reason that you could argue that so many people want to dress up as villains for Halloween. They're just more fun to dress as. I mean, we've seen hundreds of Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees running around during Halloween time. But the third type of villain I'm going to talk about here actually goes into the other two factors of why we love villains, the tragic villain. Or you could maybe argue tragic hero. The person that was either good or neutral, but then circumstances changed that either forced them to become evil or made them believe that evil was the only path to true peace. We have seen this quite a bit lately, but let's get into the villain, and I'm actually going to give him a video of his own, so I won't flesh it out completely here, but it's Darth Vader. Darth Vader is one of the most iconic, tragic hero villain stories of all time. Anakin Skywalker was meant to be the chosen one of the Jedi Knights, bring balance to the Force, and destroy the Sith. In the end, he ended up causing the downfall of the Jedi Order, and throwing the world into chaos and darkness. And instead of creating an established order, he created a dictatorship that ruled on fear and power. But it was through Vader's relationship with Luke Skywalker, his son, that helped redeem Anakin eventually. But Darth Vader, I could argue, is probably the best written villain in movie history just because of how many layers there is to him. And there are so many novels and games and comic books that have fleshed out Vader's character. It's kind of surprising we haven't had a solo film about Darth Vader yet. There's just so much to this character. He's not just some cool evil guy who wears a cape and has an awesome weapon. He's a man who had his life fall apart and everything he loved taken away from him. His mother died at the hands of monsters. His wife died due to a broken heart, even though I don't exactly love that in the writing. But that's another discussion. His own children turned against him and started a war with him, although his son never gave up on him. That's what helped draw Anakin back out, someone who genuinely cared and wasn't going to quit on him. Darth Vader is one of the most quintessential tragic hero villain stories in movie history. And we've seen this before, and when it's done right, it can be very powerful. We see either a person who's neutral or a person who was good at first, but then circumstances happen, like their life falls apart, or they lose someone close to them, or maybe they just fall on hard times, like luck they can't seem to catch a break. And either they're forced to become evil, either under mind control, or they just feel like evil is the only way they can find peace. And that leads into two factors on why we love villains. One is, they kind of do and say the things that we won't do. We've all had bad days where we've gotten angry, we've gotten upset at either someone or something. And then after a few days, maybe even a few hours, we shrug it off, we breathe, we calm down, then we go about our lives. But admit it, there have been a few days where maybe someone just pissed you off and made you angry, and you thought about getting revenge. Whether it be by beating them up or cursing them out or destroying their reputation, you just thought of ways you could get back at these people. Now, most of us, I'd like to think, are decent-minded people and have good hearts and would think, yeah, but that's just something that happens and we kind of just move on our daily lives. These villains are sort of an outlet for us to explore that dark side. See what happens if we were to go to that dark side. Turn on that switch and take advantage of these thoughts we have. So yeah, sometimes villains can be the outlet to say and do the things that we just won't do. Because, well, we're hopefully decent people. We want to help others and we want to live a good life. But either through it's being just a cool villain, a tragic villain, or just a pure evil villain, they can show what happens if just a normal person explores that dark side. And sometimes that is very relatable. Everyone can have a dark side, a side of them that they don't really want to show a lot of people. So sometimes a villain, if it's relatable enough, can help show what happens when that switch is turned on. And then let's get into the third factor on why I believe we love villains so much. We always see something of ourselves in them. I believe that the best characters always have something that the audience sees in them. Whether it's a strength, a weakness, or both, every great character has something the audience can relate to. This includes heroes and villains. If a villain is relatable enough, we can say, yeah, I've actually been in a situation like that, or I've made a decision like that, or I know someone that made a decision like that, or has been in a situation like that. And when we see that, they become real to us. And when they become real, they become timeless. When we're able to relate to these villains, whether it be through loss or through situation or just through understanding their motivations, we can make the characters more real and more timeless to us. So, yeah, villains can be relatable just as much as heroes, if not even more so. While I doubt anyone's gone through the exact same situation Darth Vader has, admit it. You probably either have been in this situation or you know someone who's been in the situation where after they lost a loved one, they just went to a dark place. They fell on hard times and they really just couldn't see a way out. Now, they didn't turn to the dark side like Anakin did, but admit it, they had a little time in their life like that. That's what great characters do. They can relate to the audience. So it's not that we love villains because we're sick, sadistic people, at least I think most of us aren't. We love villains because they can sometimes show us something that we don't really either haven't seen before or we don't want to see. They show a side of us that everyone honestly has. Everyone has a dark side or a villainous side to them, but it's because of the villains that help explore that. So in my opinion, yeah, that's why we love villains. It's because, yeah, they can make the adventure a lot more thrilling. I mean, what good is an adventure if there's not some kind of a threat to go from? Whether it be a monster, a villain, a storm, whatever, there's always something more thrilling when there's a danger to run from. We can also see something in ourselves that we probably have never seen before, whether it be a strength or a flaw. Villains are always going to have a great place in our time. There's a saying that a story is only as good as your villain, and I believe there is a lot of truth to that. I believe there are some great stories that don't have villains, but some of the best stories do have an antagonist. Whether it be through pure evil or through tragedy, a villain will always have a place in today's story time. Either they're meant to be a great foil, or they're meant to help show the audience a side of themselves that they either haven't explored before or didn't want to explore before. Villains are always going to be amazing. So, yeah, go ahead, love the villains. Name your favorite villains list. I've seen hundreds of people that name their favorite Marvel villains, or DC villains, or sci-fi villains, or movie monsters, or slashers. Because they're always going to have a place, whether it be for fear, comedy, or both. So in my opinion, yeah, love villains. They're always going to have a place in our time, and they always should. There should never be a time where a villain becomes outdated. Because what fun is it without exploring your dark side a little?